So let's make sure you're in the right place. My name is Chris Slemp. I am in Microsoft IT. So I am the admin of the largest Yammer network in the world, at least in terms of active users, engaged users, and it's quite an adventure. So I'm going to tell you about the story that we have gone on internally to adopt enterprise social in general. All right. And what I'm going to do is, I actually gave this talk a year ago, but of course a lot has happened since then, as happens every year, and so we have more data and more stories to tell about it, and I have a different kind of emphasis on the culture. But I want to put it into the framework that we use and we provide to you, to our customers. If you go to success.office.com, you'll see this kind of framework repeated there. And so I'm going to walk through that framework and tell you how we did at each of those stages. But the thing is, it's not a linear one-time process. This is an iterative process. So I'll tell you kind of what happened initially, how we succeeded, how we failed, and what we're changing up and doing differently now in each one of these areas. Okay? And you'll also notice that most of what I'm talking about today is about culture. It's about change management. It's about the soft stuff. The technology was relatively easy to get through, turning on single sign-on and putting in Active Directory sync. That took a few weeks to work all of that out. And I run into a few more complications in that Yammer likes to roll things out onto our network before everybody else's. So that's both good and an interesting thing. But the most of what I spend my time doing is talking about culture and change management. So let me just go through the first phase and hit that right off the bat. You got to set a vision first. You have to understand the culture that you're operating within, or the context that you're in. You need to know what the pain points are for your organization that Yammer is well suited to solve. You need to know what scenarios are going to be easy wins for your culture, whether that's sharing, executive connection, collaboration. What are the things that are already strengths for your company that Yammer is going to address really well, and what are going to be an uphill battle? Speaking of uphill battles, we acquired Yammer. We didn't go through the same process that most of you did. And so, as a result, what happened was, when we acquired Yammer, I had no warning. I learned about it the same time all of you did. So June 2012 is a very memorable day for me, a memorable time, as they just kind of handed me this Yammer network, and they announced to Microsoft that we had made this acquisition for $1.2 billion, and isn't this a great thing? Go use it. All kind of on the same day. And so it was, there was no preparing some groups beforehand. Normally when you have a party, you like to set out the hors d'oeuvres and, turn on the music and get things all ready for the party coming in. Yeah, none of that. So, so I'm kind of left to clean up a mess a little bit. It's not unlike what a lot of you are going to face, because Yammer has a freemium model. You're going to face a little bit of this yourself. Chances are most of you in here actually have a Yammer network, whether you know it or not, because someone in your company went out and is trying it out. Because there is that freemium model. So there will be some things going on in there, but there likely wasn't an all-company announcement like we had. So there were several things. One of the biggest things, though, is that the messaging, when it was launched, because it was such a big deal that we were adding this great company to our portfolio with all of its capabilities, the emphasis on the messaging was on that, was on what it was going to be doing for us in the market, rather than, as an employee, how you're going to get benefit out of it. And so we're still kind of trying to get that message out, which is super important. Okay, next. So while we're talking so much about culture, let's get on the same page with what culture is. When I talk about culture, I'm not talking about wearing jeans on Friday. I am not talking about free pop in the fridge. I am talking about how you work together. And you work together in certain ways so frequently that you don't even think about it. I really like this quote. It describes the pieces of culture that actually matter. When we go to engage with a customer, how do we do that? When we go to prioritize our backlog of requirements for shipping a product, how do we go about doing that? When we go to communicate or to collaborate, how do we do that? Those are the things that are just a natural part of the way your company works. That's your culture. So that means we need to shift that culture if we're going to be well suited to a social business, because a social business needs certain cultural aspects inherent in it in order to get the most value from it. Let me explain what I mean with going through a couple of these examples here. If you value efficiency, meaning if you are in the business of building a Model T Ford, you are spending a lot of time up front in planning, tooling, building a manufacturing line, and cranking out the same thing over and over again. That has worked well for a couple hundred years now. It's different now. The world has changed. We need to be much more responsive. We need to be able to change things on the fly. And in order to do that, we need to be more transparent. You'll see a theme running through all of these culture changes, which speaks to the primary difference between social technologies and social tools and all the rest of the collaboration tools that we've had in the past. And that is, in one word, transparency. Okay? It has all of these implications, however. If I'm hoarding instead of sharing, if I'm focused on safety instead of looking at my appetite for risk and managing that, I'm going to behave differently. Failure, we had a theater session, a version of this, where we did the Church of Fail. So I don't know if it was filmed, I think it was, but you could look that up. It's an attitude of embracing failure. So in other words, I can't be so afraid to fail because of how I'll look to my management that I don't want to put something out there that makes me look dumb. I don't want to put something out there that looks half-baked. I'll talk more to that in a minute. And then the third one from the bottom there, suspicion versus trust. That's actually where you'll hear me coming back to that several times throughout this presentation. It ends up being, I think, one of the key cultural aspects that we need to focus on within Microsoft, and will probably be the same for you. Okay. Data is starting to reveal the nature of our culture. This is a breakout of how we are posting on Yammer internally. So you can see that only 43% of the messages that get posted are posted in public groups where the entire company can take advantage of that. So what's happening is we're limiting the value that we're getting out of Yammer by, we're only getting like 43% of the value of Yammer. Not entirely true. That's kind of a broad sweeping statement. But people who are working in private groups are getting some value out of it. People who are joining that group brand new can see the history and so forth. But you're not getting the collective wisdom and IP and the strength that you get from all of those employees when you're working in a private group. So, all right. For a t-shirt. What percentage of Microsoft do you believe is actually posting? And if you saw this on Monday, you don't get to answer. 40. Sorry? 12. I heard. 20. Actually, 20 I think is closest. There you go. If you need a different size, I've got a few sizes up here. So it is 17% are actually posting on Yammer, okay? We've got another 52% that are lurking. They are visiting, they are reading, they're engaged in some way other than posting. They might be liking. I think I included that in there, liking posts. And 30% are just not there. Okay. So what does that tell us? It tells us that there's an issue of trust. I don't feel safe posting out on Yammer for one reason or another. So I started digging into this a little bit more. Peter Drucker actually said culture eats strategy for lunch. We had some strategies that I'll be walking through here, and I think they were solid. So why are we getting these results that I would like to be better? By the way, that 17%, it sounds pretty bad, but if you think about it, the 99.1 rule, we're actually double that. So, it's certainly better than the average internet site, but we would expect more from an internal site like this. We certainly have our sites set higher than that. So, this is a chart of a particular division within Microsoft that was acquired last year. And they jumped to the network when they were acquired. They were pretty thrilled about it and told us so. And then they disappeared. Why is that? And I started to dig into it. What happened was, so this is data that is now filtered for all of the participants within that organization inside of Microsoft. And I'll tell you how I got this data in a minute. But you can see, there's some all-company stuff, but there's a lot of people posting in private groups. And the overall posting traffic is actually very low, about 1/10 of what the average employee posts. So what's going on there? As I talk to some people, we were used to working socially, and then we joined this culture where all you do is email, and now I'm flooded with all this email that I have to manage and deal with. And so it was just a question of time for a lot of people. This is another division within the company that's one of our marketing teams, our marketing division. And you can see that they are actually posting at twice the rate of the average Microsoft employee, and they are posting more publicly. Except that the most active groups within those organizations are also private groups. So they're setting a good example. They would be setting an even better example if those groups weren't private. So what did I do? I reached out to the owners of those groups, of those top 2 private groups in specific, and said, hey, what's going on here? Why is it that you are working in private? And this is what I got. We're talking about confidential information in there. So our usage policy, when you come into Yammer, says confidential information should be shared in private groups. We've actually classified Yammer to hold our highest data classification. You can put, spreadsheets of Social Security numbers into Yammer if you want to, but it needs to be in a private group where the membership is controlled and managed. Okay, but the big question is, what is confidential? What does that mean? And we have to have a company-wide conversation about this and get tighter on our definition of what this is. Because in the end, what happened, especially the one group that I talked to, they said, we're having these conversations about how we might be changing the way that some of our sales field is compensated next year. And it's not completely baked yet, these plans. I'm like, so wait a minute. You're having a discussion that's going to directly impact the livelihood and everyday operation of all the people that you have responsibility over, and you're not including them in that conversation? They don't have any input into that whatsoever? Is that what we're saying? What happened was, so out of that conversation, we realized that this cultural phenomenon within Microsoft, and I'm sure it happens in many of your companies, is if I include everybody in the conversation, then they'll think that that it's a democracy, and frankly, it's not. That doesn't necessarily follow. We need to teach our people that we trust them to be a part of the conversation, but to know that there is a decision maker. And that doesn't need to change. We could move into a holacracy if you wanted to, and you can look up that word, and it's kind of an interesting theory, but for now, we have decision makers, and they can still be the decision maker even though our conversation is open. I got Jim Dubois, our CIO, did a blog post internally a couple weeks ago, and I got permission to use this quote from him, where he also, I think, hit on one of the main reasons that trust is actually getting harder in some ways and not easier, which is that things are changing so rapidly. How many folks are just kind of overwhelmed by how much stuff is getting rolled out at this conference? It's quite a bit. It's quite a bit to take in. A fire hose. I think I saw one of the first posts, one of the first tweets I saw at this was, oh my gosh, I think it was the keynote. The keynote's a fire hose. When we're accelerating all of this, it's harder even to trust people. And I think partly because, we don't want to look dumb. We don't want to put ourselves out there and look like we don't know what we're talking about. But so I love the quote from Ernest Hemingway here that I think could be our North Star. So those are some of the cultural aspects or the context in which we went in. So with this vision in place of what we think we need to do, an understanding of our culture, then we need to create a plan. Okay. So we did some things well. We did move very quickly with legal to arrive on this usage policy. We did bring in the Yammer customer success team. They're an amazing resource, and they were the ones that clued me in very early on to say, hey, focus on a champions program. And so we did that, and I'll talk about them a little bit too. So some of the good things that we did. We also needed to make sure that we addressed security up front. We knew that this modality was new to people. They would need to know that we had secured it down. I'm not going to go into the details of all this diagramming. I think the main point is that we are actually putting things in place to scan for data loss protection. That allows us some governance over how these external networks get created. So this Ignite conference network that many of you, hopefully all of you, have joined, or the Office 365 network, those are external networks that my team put through a process to approve so that we understood that there was somebody that owns that network and they understood how it worked. So I'm not going to drain this slide, and the point is that we focused on security, worked with our security team so that we could, with confidence, go out to our employees and say, yes, this is secure. This is an example of the external network governance policies that we have in place that enable us to, with confidence, say that these things are looked at and managed carefully. We actually go through every quarter and we look at which external networks are essentially dead, which ones have gone quiet and dead or just never really took off, and we'll delete those external networks if you're not using them and keeping them up to date and maintained. We actually put in an administrator exam. It's really simple, like 10-question little exam before somebody can create an external network, because we were getting people provisioning these external networks, an entire network that they were going to invite all these people in and have this interaction and conversation, and they didn't know the difference between a network and a group. Now, don't feel bad if you don't, but someone who runs a network probably ought to know the difference. So we had our own exam in place for them. Okay. I also want to tell a story. And the reason I want to tell this story is that a lot of times around the topic of security, a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt arises, not just within IT, especially in a tech organization. People are making guesses and assumptions, many of them false, about how something works or what's going to get exposed and so on. And there's this fascinating story that came out around a feature that Yammer launched just recently. Actually, they announced here that it's going to be announced or released to everyone in a couple of weeks. It was released to us a couple of months ago. So we've been grappling with this one. So this feature allows you to add an external party, so someone not in your company, outside of your network, to an individual thread on Yammer. So if I have a vendor or a partner or a supplier or somebody that I need to bring into just one conversation, just like in an email thread, I can just add them to the email thread, right? If it's appropriate to do so. Well, we want to give you the power and the flexibility to do that within Yammer as well. And so they launched this, and a whole bunch of debates and conversations about whether this is like email or not, but I won't go into that. What was interesting about this conversation is that it turned into a conversation about feedback on the UI that was being developed for this feature. And an engineer on the Yammer team saw that feedback and responded. They said, oh, that's my fault. I got a little carried away with the exclamation marks. I'm going to remove them and tone it down a little bit. Okay. So then what happens? How do I learn about this? A friend of mine sends me an email, right, with a screenshot from Outlook.com. So he was on his home computer, right? He was actually excited about, sorry, I think I went backwards there. He was actually excited about the interaction that had taken place here. That an engineer, the power of Yammer, this engineer who's working on the product sees this because we're talking in the open and is able to improve the product. But I saw the irony here. This is incredible. So open collaboration about controls that should be in place to control collaboration results in an improvement to open collaboration, and then gets leaked through the very closed collaboration tool that was supposed to be the model for how to control collaboration. A little meta, maybe. The slide's there if you want to walk through it slowly. But I just think this is the kind of thing that reveals culture again. Are people afraid? Are people afraid unnecessarily? And you need to be able to understand, anticipate, be able to respond to things like this. Okay. So what was our plan? So our plan was, again, on the advice of the customer success managers from the Yammer team. Now their scope is as wide as Office 365. They told us to set up a champions program, so we did. We have a couple community managers who are doing some of the tasks on the bottom. The champions program allows us to scale and do some of these things at the top. We have a social enablement board who, frankly, is kind of in maintenance mode now because they were mostly needed at the front end to help us make policy decisions. That was representatives from every division and function in the company, as many as we could get to show up, and they helped us to set some policies and things. Okay, so then what we did in the middle here is we looked across all our divisions at Microsoft, and we looked and saw, well, we didn't have the data at the time, but we had a pretty good idea where some pockets of success were happening. And we found some early wins and showcased them. So the top one is the general manager of Australia. She was kind of our first executive who really jumped on board and was showing by example. And at the bottom, some of our engineering teams who were showing how they were using it as well. So we captured these stories and told those. We have our champions who we would supply with some tools to help them. They would actually help each other. They set up a group for all of those champions to come into and talk together about how they were driving change in their organizations. This is a model. This is just an example of a tool that we would give them. I have a blog post about this. It seems to resonate with folks. And there was a session about this earlier in the week where they've exploded this into a large and really Richard Harbridge and some others have exploded this into a nice big white paper that talks in much more detail about the concept. Okay, so now we've got a plan, we commit resources to it, and we execute. So how did we do? Okay, another t-shirt. Who wants to take a guess? Ah! Okay, good, you saw the wrong number. Let's see how fast you were able to read. How many thousand people you think is engaged on Yammer a day? Did anyone? What'd you say? 12? What did I hear? I heard 23. All right. 27,000 people engaged every day. So that's not bad. We would all like to see a hockey stick there, and I think that's ahead of us. I think we can get there. So I think we did pretty well. I think we could do a lot better. And part of the reason, again, comes back to what I'm now starting to see from the data. Okay, moving on. So how did we, because I wanted it to be better, how are we going to change this? I didn't put some things that I realized as we looked at our plan and wanted to reevaluate it. I didn't put enough emphasis on operations and support. I ended up spending a lot of time doing that myself. So big tip and advice for you if you're an admin taking this on. It's really easy to get caught in the trap of answering a lot of questions about Yammer as they come in over Yammer. Be careful about how much time that sucks up, and talk to your support team, your internal support teams, about how they might be able to use Yammer as a channel to offer support. And they are starting to do that now, which is fantastic. But the piece that I wanted to revamp the most was that guidance piece in the middle. So we had just kind of put out some best practices and things. We partnered with our marketing team and got some great materials out there. Our champions we're doing well, and I'll highlight some of them in the future because they created some great case studies for us. But what we saw happen was that many of our champions, they were all doing this as a side job, essentially, as something extra that they do. And in many, many cases, their management didn't actually appreciate that when it came to review time. So we decided to, what we decided to do is take a slightly different approach. We established a social consulting practice, essentially, internally. And this is just starting, so I think, the proof is still in the pudding, but I have high hopes on this one. So the social consulting practice then would actually generate social champions. So we go into a team and we say, actually most of the time they come to us and say, hey, how can we better use Yammer? And then we immediately change that conversation and say, okay, no, what business problem are you trying to solve? And then we'll talk about Yammer and SharePoint and all the pieces of Office 365 for solving it. But yes, we can help you with that. And you need to put some skin in the game. You actually need to appoint a champion, and so we'll create one there. And then we will drive the business value that you're looking for. And then we're going to tell your story because we want others to see that. So that's the end goal for me, is creating social success stories and really evangelizing them. So that's what we're doing now. So this is a new site. It'll just be launching this week, actually, or next, where we've gone through and collected a whole bunch of stories from across Microsoft about where it's been successful. And we put them on a site and tag them all for different categories. So if I'm an engineer and I want to increase collaboration, I can look that up and see stories from other people who look and smell like me, to see what kind of success they had with it. And so as we did that, we reached out and tried to collect some of the stories that were out there already. Now, we knew there was more going on there than we were really aware of, but we have been kind of overwhelmed with the kinds of stories that have come in. There are hard numbers in here, right? 30% reduction in email traffic, 76% growth, sales awards, lots of concrete stuff here. And it's just fantastic to see all of this. But the one that I love the most is that one. Because it talks about an emotional attachment to this. This tells me that we're actually having an impact on culture. That people are feeling like they're part of one company instead of just 100,000 people spread all over the world who have the same vision to change the world, but not really connected and feeling as one. They feel more like it now. That's exciting to me. So as I was saying, we want to create all of these stories, and so we're asking for a shared commitment from them. I have no idea how much time I have left, by the way. This doesn't seem to be counting down. So shared commitment to the journey means that we are bringing something to the table as IT. There are certain things that we're going to bring and we're going to provide for you. But you, as a business who want to become a more social business, whether this is a division or a team, you need to bring something to the table as well. You need to have a community manager. You need to have executive sponsorship. You need to have a communications plan in place. And you need to know how you're going to be successful, because we got the data. If you want to measure it, we've got it. Actually, we've got the data around how you're collaborating. You have the data that are your KPIs, the things that you care about. And so how can we mash those things up? And I'll be talking about that a little bit more in a second. Okay. So what do I mean by a commitment to community management? What we found as we looked at our data was that even though there were official groups, they needed an investment to stay healthy. So what happened, as an example, on the left here, you've got a group that was sponsored by Human Resources. We were launching a new, I'm trying to think which one this was. I think this was, healthcare. So we were having a change in the way our healthcare benefits worked. And so they launched a new Yammer group for our employees to talk about it. I think that's what it was. Anyhow, you can see the monthly trend, right? They answered a bunch of questions, flash in the pan, then the HR department left. And they didn't maintain this, and so people didn't come back. Whereas there was another HR group that was just started up by an average employee. She actually asked permission of our head of HR and said, hey, can I start this thing up over here? I don't know is that okay? And our head of HR said, yeah, go for it. We're not, officially participating. We might chime in from time to time, and they do, but it's mostly just peer-to-peer talking about some of our benefits. And the response rate there continues to climb. It's a slight dip in participation, but still much, much more active than the other one, just because some of those issues are a little bit older now and people understand them. The one on the right is an official program. This is our IT dog food program. By dog food, we're using our own stuff. And so very early builds get rolled out to the community, and this is a group for them to talk about these early builds and get information about it. And because it is not only sponsored, but it's actually maintained, and there's an active community manager there. They're looking at these metrics and wanting to improve them, then it actually has an increased monthly trend, nice, gradual, and steady. That's actually the way you like it in a community, and it's a nice, healthy community. Okay. So that's kind of leading into, we need to measure these things, measure our success as an overall program in order to know if we're doing it well. Okay. So where do we think we are? I think last year I said we were here. So I took a step back, and I think we are definitely moving into business value. I think it's because of the nature of the engagements that we're at. We used to talk mostly about the high-level value of what social networking can do for us as a company. Now we're talking about its business value to you, and that pivot, I think, is helping us to mature our network. And we see the quality improving because of the nature of the kinds of stories we can tell. So I was telling you about our Yammer champions, and some of them have done some pretty amazing work. And I can tell you not only a great story now, but I can tell it with data as well. So I'm going to focus on these two on the left. We've got our sales teams, many of them working the way Eric showed them how to work. Eric had a specific role on the team that that focuses on Target, one of our customers. And he was a very early champion of Yammer and convinced his team, and by team, I'm talking about the 100 people across Microsoft that touch that customer in any way. So that's from account managers and the technical folks and product group people, marketing, whoever touches that customer in any way got invited into that group. And they do everything there. They have their status reports, they talk about upcoming customer visits, they talk about all sorts of things. So as they embraced that, the following quarter, they won, CPE stands for Customer Partner Experience. They won a sales award for that, for the amount of satisfaction that they were driving in their customer. As a result of that, we're now starting to develop a scorecard for this and creating a movement that we call the responsive field. And we now have about 140 groups that show that they're at least giving this a shot, that are following that example. And so we're trying to get more of the message out. It's kind of a grassroots movement at the moment. And as soon as we get through the end of this fiscal year, we'll try to make a bigger push to make it a little more official. Because now we have some interesting scorecards. I can actually see that those people, those groups that have more participation and are more responsive. In other words, there's a higher percentage of responses to threads in those groups. Those are the award-winning teams. If I could take off the fuzzing here on the slide, you would see the names of these teams, and these are the ones that are winning awards, sales awards. Okay. The CEO group. Satya is setting a great example, actually. He's posting once or twice a week in Yammer. He's got a group that he uses to connect with all of us. And once a month, he hosts a Q&A session over video. So it's streamed over video to the entire company, but he takes questions in over Yammer. About half the questions he fields are from his Yammer group. But beyond that, what happens is he has actually a team that's focused on his internal community. as well, and they get a report of the activity within that group. They focus in on what are the top threads. What are the threads that have the most contributors, the most likes, and so that they can gauge the sentiment, and I don't just mean positive, negative. I mean, what are people talking about? What are the topics that people are passionate about? So that when he goes into those Q&A sessions, he's prepared for that. Something just came up this week, and somebody sent me a thread to say, "Are you watching this one? And are we sure that Satya's going to address this in his next Q&A?" And so I reached out to Satya's team, and they said, "Yeah, we're on it. We got that one, so we'll cover it next time." So it's awesome. So how are they getting all of this? We launched a service that we're internally calling Social BI. I chose that name because I wanted people to understand that they could get business intelligence out of the data that comes from this social network. So we certainly stood it up to help the community managers understand the health of the communities or the groups or the teams that they're managing there in Yammer. But one of the main reasons I did it is actually some of these bullets here towards the bottom. I wanted to provide this data in such a way that owners of these businesses could actually mash it up with their KPIs, their standard business metrics, to see the correlation between the way that we collaborate. In other words, how responsive are we? How fast can someone get an answer to a question? How many people are participating? Those kinds of questions, the geographic distribution, et cetera, et cetera. How do we collaborate, and how does that correlate with our business performance? So one of the first steps I wanted to do was to actually take, because the data that you get from Yammer, although it has information about the profiles of the people who are in the network, that is just kind of manually put in there. It's not fed in directly from your HR systems. So what I wanted to do, and therefore not 100% reliable, so what I wanted to do was take our official HR data straight from SAP, plug it into the model, the data model that we have for all of the Yammer activity, and therefore be able to get data by organization, by role, by region. So we have that now. So we are using tyGraph. I know that there are many providers out there. There have been several other sessions that have talked about this. Have talked about the different options that are available for analytics, so be sure to look over the recordings as you get home. There's some great sessions that go very deep on all of these things. We are using tyGraph specifically for the reason I was just talking about, because its ability to be able to mash it up with other data. I think there's generally two big categories of these providers or approaches that you could take with this social analytics data. One are very, very simple visualizations of the basics for the average group owner that wants to know the activity level and who are some influencers in my group. There's some basic questions that everybody who's running these groups have, and that's what these dashboards can provide. But in my organization, I've got a whole 100,000 techies, really. And if I just gave them a few dashboards, that would never be enough. They'd come back to me and say, "Hey, I want to mash it up with this. I want access to the cube directly. I want to spin and pivot this data any way I want to." So I knew I had to provide that kind of a solution. And when I did, I tell you, the game has changed for me. Just about a month ago, we finally got all that into place. And I say finally, not because it was hard to set up tyGraph, but because our HR and IT processes made it a little bit difficult. But we finally got it there, and I've got some pretty amazing data. I can now tell you, I can drill in on a specific organization and say how many people are doing anything there, how much activity per person, how likely is it for someone in my team to get a response to their post on Yammer. How public are they? How rich are these conversations? Meaning, how long are the threads, right? If all I've got in my organization are people just posting and then hearing crickets, or just here's a link, oh, that's cool, then that's not as much business value as deep and engaged conversations. So then we started realizing we can actually use this. Remember the social consulting practice that we've just started? we can now use this as a diagnostic tool when we go into this internal engagement. So a team comes to us and says, we want to use Yammer better. Okay, well, let's talk about some scenarios. Okay, we've got some scenarios that we want to use it in. Great, we understand that. Now, who can help us with this? I can know who on my team is actually using Yammer and how, right? So I can actually drill down. I can just use this filter here to drill down through the organization, find the top-level manager of this organization that I'm interested in, and get by their title, I can see who is contributing the most, and I can say, oh, I've got a developer here, and I've got a PM over here, and I've got a marketing manager here, who we can target now to say, hey, could you help us start this Yammer initiative? You look like you already get it. You're already out there using it. Maybe you can be our champion. And so we can identify them. We can also find out what groups they're posting in. For example, this organization, which happens to be mine, are sending a lot of private messages between each other. They're also using a private group is the most popular one there, and then there are some others scattered throughout. So we want to look at that private group and say, hey, can we maybe make that one public, because you can set a better example for the rest of the larger organization. So these are the kinds of insights that as I go into these consulting relationships with internally to help them make better use of it, and to make our engagement with them a little more successful. I can also take this data now and make it available in Power BI. And we're just starting to play with this now. There's a lot of, it's just fun. It's fun to play with those visualizations, be able to provide them through the web, and we're continuing to build this out. But you can see here, I've got how public these people are being by area, by profession, by their org size, and so on. But this one I'm really excited about too. This is the other thing that we can do with our data. We can start crafting personalized experiences with social. So as soon as, it was a couple of years ago, I think, when we first started talking about this notion of social analytics, somebody said, oh, you mean we can start building an Amazon and telling you that other people like you who liked this thing should look at this, right? So that's what Amazon does. And I thought, wow, theoretically we could. That seems far out there. I can do that now. So now I can say, so that first example, this is a mock-up. We're in the process of building it. That first one there is links to the content on this person's site. So this is a knowledge management site, very large one within Microsoft. There's hundreds of thousands of documents in this site. And their problem is always bubbling up the stuff that's the most important, the most relevant for you. So on this homepage, I've got links to content on this site that is being discussed most frequently on Yammer. So in our data model, we can filter out for all the URLs that are being shared on Yammer. Now I can filter that for all the ones that are coming from this website and say which ones have the most discussions about them. Pretty simple. And then the bottom one there is there's a lot of posting that goes on in Yammer. There's hundreds. Actually, I didn't think I shared this stat. We actually have 50,000 groups in our Yammer network. Try finding the most relevant content in that. It's up to, I checked last night, 11 million posts. How do you find the most relevant thing for me? So what I can do now is I can say, okay, I know by logging into this portal that you are a small, medium business seller. Okay? I have mapped, by hand for now, I have mapped that role to these 12 groups that happen to be the most active for your role. Okay? Now, I want to filter all of the content in those groups for just announcements. So announcements are a special type of post in Yammer where the owner of that group has said, this is very important, I want to push it out to everybody's inbox. Okay? So these are the most important posts from these 12 groups that are the most important for your role. And now I can expose links directly to those announcements right there on the homepage. So that's a melding of social and relevancy using data. Okay. Where are we at? Right. So to wrap up a little bit, I'm going to save some time for Q&A. What would I do differently? I would have a much stronger vision from the C-suite. I would probably create champs rather than try and find them. I don't think it's an either-or thing. I think we can certainly take advantage of those champs as they come in and connect with them and help them to join them to the champion community and help them grow it locally. But I think creating those champs where there's already shown to be an interest expressed by the businesses is the way to go. I would definitely get analytics sooner than I have. The more the better, because they've been revelatory in not just how our culture is and what cultural aspects we need to change, but also helping us diagnostically to work with these people, work with these businesses. What would I do the same? I would do all those things the same. An early focus on champions. The early wins with corporate communications. Find those scenarios that are going to have broad impact. So we had, very early on, one of the first things we did, in fact, when we launched, was we worked with our internal corporate communications to make sure that our company meeting, so we acquired Yammer in June, and then in September, October, we have our company-wide meeting. And we made sure that Yammer was the official back channel, and that was the way that you were to talk amongst each other during the company meeting. And it was a fantastic use case, certainly got everybody jumping on and participating much earlier than would otherwise have been. So I think that is all for now. I'm going to turn it over to some questions. I wanted to save as much time as possible for questions because I love that, and wanted to promote Steve's session. He's the one who just ducked out to go to prepare for his session. That's the last social session of the conference during our last session time. So thank you very much for listening to me, and we'll take some questions. Yes.
In the Success Center, one of the things that they recommend as being really important is getting buy-in from the head of your unit or your organization.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about the group if you have that, and do you have any insights on if you don't?
Yeah, so he's talking about getting buy-in from the leaders of your organization. Very important. So here's the interesting thing, because actually Charlene Lee has written a book recently called The Engaged Leader, where she talks about the importance of this. Now, she made some public posts about this is why nobody's using your network, because the leader's not using it. And I agree that it's really important. In fact, it's probably necessary, but it's not enough. Because I know, again, from our data, I know that our top leadership is actually participating at about the same level as the average Microsoft employee. But they're not participating quite the way I would like them to. So it's not just engaging your leader, it's engaging your leader in a way that they understand the purpose of that engagement. So one of the key scenarios that we're finding a lot of success with, for example, is that some of our leaders, so the less successful ones are using it just to kind of show that I'm out there on Yammer, and they'll, maybe post an announcement because some marketing person internally handed them this thing to copy and paste and post. Less successful. What's much more successful are those that are actually using it to connect with their employees. And what that looks like is, particularly for those that have a geo-distributed workforce, they can't always just walk around. You've heard of management by walking around the floor. They can't do that. But if their teams are working in these open public groups, then this executive can just go visit the group. And if you're working out loud there, then it's just as if I'm showing up in your hallway, if you will, and knocking on a door. I can see the conversations that are happening and just like something, or maybe ask a follow-up question, which shows that not only shows that I'm engaged, but is going to get me the information that I need in real time, rather than trying to figure out a visit and all of the overhead that goes with a visiting executive, right? They can just do what we call touch bases. They just connect with those groups there. So it's an example of where we see some success. It is very important. I would certainly like, and I'm still seeking, a kind of high-level executive sponsor to say we should use Yammer internally, and this is why. Part of the reason I think that we don't, and I think part of the reason this kind of realization hit me the other week, part of the reason that it's hard for them to do that, they haven't had to do that with any other technology before, right? You haven't had to come out and say, we've got Skype for Business installed now. Go use it, and this is why. You haven't had to have that because Yammer is distinct enough from email that it's important that we understand it and use it in its proper context. See the which tool when conversation. But it's similar enough to email that people ask that question over and over and over again. We actually did some surveys internally about what is keeping people from using Yammer more. And I think they were a little afraid to answer in some of these cultural things that I was mentioning early on. But one of the most common ones we got back was why. They just didn't understand why they needed to. And so that's why I really want that from the top. Other questions? Please. Want a shirt?
Yeah, sure.
All right.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Great session.
Thank you.
2 quick questions. I think you've touched on it, but can you please define how you see engagement? Is it 10 posts per month, per user? How does Microsoft actually define engagement?
That's a good one. I'm going to give you a bonus on that one. So this is a international power adapter of some kind. So someone up and get that one. Has it got like Microsoft IT on it or something? Tracy? Yeah, something like that. Anyway. It's a cool thing that I was supposed to give out, so there you go. How do we define engagement? I think that is, I think that's one of the key questions we still have yet to land on. And primarily because I think it depends on the context. See, so think about, because the groups could be of all kind of different natures, right? What we think about as engagement within a CEO connection group will look very different than the engagement that we see in a group that's used for support, right? Or a group that's used for collaboration. And so what I'm going to be doing is working with our tyGraph partners to figure out, are there some algorithms that we can, are there some patterns that we can see coming out here with different kinds of groups revealing different kinds of collaboration patterns? Because I don't like, I mean, for now, it's okay for us to put up a dashboard and say, here's your influencers dashboard, and the people who are getting the most replies to their posts and the more likes on their posts, and people who are posting all over the company rather than in just one group. Those seem to be like influential people. I think we have some good algorithms for that, but I'm really interested in the context as well, and I think that's going to take some time to work out.
Agreed. There are metrics out on like Twitter where if you go there X amount of times per month, you are very likely to come back again. So when you find that out, that golden nugget, please post it.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Next question, and this is the elephant in the conference, but if you guys have integrated office groups with Yammer, can you share about that experience, please?
No, we haven't. We are looking for and desperately wanting the kind of integration that everybody's asking for between new office groups and Yammer. Boy, what else to say about that hasn't been said already? I think my conception of how that's going to work has changed for the better as a result of this conference, actually, because of all the conversation we've had about it. I used to think about this whole groups notion as this thing that's happening in the Outlook email world that's going to bring everything to that place where we all live. And I thought, okay, that's good, I guess, but what happens with Yammer? And that's kind of what everybody's been asking. I now understand it better and differently. To be groups is this foundational component that's going to improve all of the experiences over time. It just so happens that Exchange and Outlook is kind of the first one where that's showing up, and to Delve to some degree, and then there was an announcement around CRM. Yammer's coming, and so I think what we'll see is kind of the blossoming of extra functionality in all of those different experiences as a result as groups matures.
When you guys do it, are you willing to commit to a Yam Jam on Office 365
Oh,
to
you
share your
can bet.
experience?
You can bet there will be. Yes.
Cool.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Please.
Excuse me.
Over here. Let's go over here.
One thing that we found, we started to use Yammer some time ago, but it's very, I would say, likely unsuccessful so far. And the biggest problem is the competition of Outlook for different reasons. But one of them is very crucial, is that there is no offline experience in Yammer, basically. So if I need to search for anything I've been discussed with someone in the organization, in Outlook, I can find email messages that have been sent across. I can find conversations in Link, even if I'm flying somewhere on a plane. But I cannot find Yammer messages at all. So, and not only this, that creates another confusion. There's two different tools with complete different ways. One of them, for instance, Outlook allows you to do very rich messages where it's easier to follow what you're trying to say. But in Yammer, it's text-based, very, very simple text, not even applying any type of formatting to it, not even tabs. I don't know. It's just a very, very simple thing. So, but mostly this distinction between two tools, one of them offline or online, and the other one only online, that creates confusion. And many times, when we discuss this.
So I both agree and disagree with some of the things that you've said. So I certainly agree they are different. One of the main ways in which they're different is one is 40 years old and one is about 6 years old. So I think we need to give Yammer a chance to mature and develop. But as for the offline, you can actually, if a particular group, and I have done this in the past, I find that generally even on a plane, I connect to the internet. I mean, there's hardly ever a situation where I don't have internet connectivity for the most part. And if I don't, frankly, I'm thankful I go to my book and have actually time to read something, right, rather than respond to email or whatever. But there is actually a strategy for offline. What I do is I go and subscribe to a few of the most important groups in Yammer. Not all of them, for heaven's sake, because I don't want that much email. But a few of my most important groups, I might subscribe to an email and then just create a rule that filters them to a folder, just like we often do with a distribution list, right? So that I can have those offline, and then I can read them and reply to them offline. I can actually post to Yammer, and Outlook has that cached and can post it to the group as soon as I'm back online. So there are strategies, there are ways to do that. Obviously, it's going to improve over time. As for the formatting question, that's also, I think, a culture change. What I've seen is that people who are working and getting a lot of value out of Yammer don't complain about that too much because they find that the nature and the flow of the conversations, they're not worried about the formatting, they're worried about getting work done. And so the conversation just flows a little faster and more naturally. That's what I find.
Just being new, I may ask the obvious one, but you've shown some cool stuff and said also it's new. Some of it is new compared to last year, so you definitely have spent some work on that.
I think it's been an iterative process over the last 6 months or so as I've worked with the tyGraph folks, as I've done some brainstorming internally and gotten some feedback internally about what kinds of things people would be useful. I think it's continually evolving, and that's part of the reason I love the solution that we have is that it's just completely adaptable to whatever I need. I don't know that it's for everybody because it's so you got to know at the moment you got to know Power Pivot, you got to know these tools to really take the most advantage of them. But there's generally somebody in your organization that can help you with that. We have a lot of them in our company, so they really needed it. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
Have you seen any scenarios?
Oops, sorry. Probably it's hard for you to see that as me to see you. Yeah. Scenarios.
Any scenarios where a Yammer group or network has kind of like de-evolved from its purpose to become something like a complaint board or something else, and then how do you deal with something like that?
Yeah, good question. That is Community Management 101 is what that is. And we train our champions, especially those who have signed up to kind of help us look at the community at the network-wide to watch out for those kinds of things and try and coach them in certain directions. One of the interesting strategies that we took is that we did not squash a few key groups that provide an outlet for that. We have a group on our network that I just love. It's called Curmudgeonville. And the description on the group is where careers go to die, right? And the logo is Statler and Waldorf, the cranky guys from the Muppets, you know? So it is a place, and it's a hilarious place to go at lunchtime, because people just go there to whine and moan and complain. And just put it all there. If you want to whine and moan and complain, go there and do that. That's a great place for it. And I think that has helped. And what's interesting is that somebody was making a comment the other day. There was an old distribution list within Microsoft. It was called, and it's funny that you say devolved, because this distribution list was called Lightbulb, and it's still around, actually. And it was originally created so that anyone in Microsoft, I think they limit it to full-time employees, could go in and have really frank conversations about, it was supposed to be about new ideas, new things that we should do, and it has devolved over the years. I've been at Microsoft for 15 years and watched it happen. It became a place to whine and moan. And I saw a comment recently that they don't see that same culture moving to similar groups on Yammer. So I think the openness helps with that a little bit, but I would recommend giving them a venue to do it.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Let's go over here.
My company actually, the communications and human resource departments came to IT with the need for engagement.
Yeah.
And so they were, in essence, our business owner. And then IT found that Yammer was a good solution, and we became the technical owner. You kind of seem like you're the one-man show doing both of these. So I was just kind of, can you expand a little more about what other departments are actually driving the engagement versus just the IT group? Thank you.
Yes. So what's the kind of the structure of our team and all of that? I was a one-man show for a little while. I have some help now. I have another partner in crime, if you will, to do a lot of the, to help me with a lot of the strategy and prioritization and so forth. I have some vendor dollars we used. So the consulting business that I talked about, the internal consulting business, we actually do a managed partner model with that. So we found an external company that can scale as we need them to handle these things, someone that gets it, that gets our vision, gets the methodology, has it down. I can trust them to hand off these engagements to, and they bring me in as a SME as needed. So yeah, we did run it out of IT. Your question was, a lot of them come from HR or corporate communications. What is their role? They are literally just another stakeholder or user of business. I say just, I mean, there's some of our more important ones, but we did that deliberately, and I've seen the debate go back and forth as to whether this role should live in IT or not. I'm actually a strong proponent of it living in IT, because we have that broad view across the company of all of the different roles, right? If it's owned by corporate communications, as it almost was, they have a specific agenda, which is using this platform for communications rather than collaboration or community. Right? That's not really their wheelhouse, if you will, right? So IT can have that kind of agnostic view of the way that the platform should be used in all kinds of different scenarios. So I'm a proponent of keeping it in IT. I moved into IT about almost 4 years ago, I guess. I never imagined when I started at Microsoft I'd be in IT, but I love it because of that broad view now. And yeah, just a big proponent of having it there. Does that answer the question? Okay, great. Let's go over here.
We have everything on premise currently and are not using an official Yammer channel, but are planning to go into Office 365. So we're wondering whether, from listening to everybody in this conference the past week, whether to focus on Office 365 groups and let Yammer just be one of the features or tools that are used, versus focusing on Yammer itself and then let those groups grow. If you had to do everything over again and you were starting from scratch, what would you choose, you think?
Yeah, your question behind him. Yeah, what do I got up here? I got more stuff for you up here if you want it. So if I had to start over right now, I think even coming back from this conference, I'm probably going to be giving different guidance than I would have before. So this is a very nascent answer, I guess I would say. I think that different styles of collaboration are going to appeal to different people. There are people. I was talking to somebody at the booth who says that his company is made up of people who, how to put this politely, are not likely to change anytime soon. And so I think that the kind of functionality that is coming to email is going to work fantastically for those people. I think you're going to have certain cohorts and types of people, and I'm not talking about age here. I'm talking about people that prefer a different kind of collaboration. We do see a lot of people who are coming in from the colleges who into our new employee orientation programs, right? And they tell them, oh, you need to sign up on all these email distribution lists, and they go, email? I talk with my grandparents over email. Are you kidding me? And so they are looking for something else. So I don't think this is necessarily a generational thing, but there's no denying there's a factor there as well. And so I think having these different modalities of people being able to collaborate and have the same kinds of functionality, I think that's what the power of groups is that actually, if I prefer an email way of communicating, I can have that. If I prefer a feed-based way of communicating, I can have that. And we can still get all the calendaring and the real time and all those kinds of things with the same group without having to manage membership all over the place. That's.
Sorry to interrupt you, but there is an answer maybe on that one. About 10 years ago, at Microsoft US, there was a factor for index. I don't know if you have heard of it. It's been made in the Netherlands by Microsoft Netherlands with a company in the Netherlands, a consulting firm. And Microsoft US, small group, did a factor for index, which is looking at culture, inspiration, technology, and organization. And they did that, and they looked just new world of work. And that same company in the Netherlands now made a factor for social. So that's why I asked a question about the same question. They're curious about what you would do if you would do it again. There is a questionnaire, which is a factor for social, which is actually looking on what type of social media do you want to incorporate within your company, and which groups are ready for that. So you have factory workers, all those kinds of personas.
So there's different personas within your company. They're going to be more or less ready for this kind of. That's a great point. Yes.
Emails, you can group those and then have an oil stain on that.
Yeah, exactly. So, some of the things that this data is revealing is just that kind of a thing because, unsurprisingly, our HR and legal departments, for example, it's not that they're not using Yammer, but they're using it in almost exclusively in private groups for good reasons. Thank you for your question, Leslie.
I guess the answer is you put what you want to achieve or collaboration as the focus and then let people or somebody else in a way evolve what tools you're going to use.
There was a slide earlier in my presentation that talks about which tool when. There's a blog post that I put up there about that, that really, the conclusion of that blog post isn't, here's all the great, this really simple way in which you can explain to people which tool I should use when. I think there's some decent models for that, but my current take on that is it's not about which tool. It's about how you use the tools that you have. And are you using them in a way that allows more inclusion and collaboration, or are you doing it in a very siloed way? So let's go over here, and then Erica, we can be sure to get you.
My question's about your champions.
Yes.
You talked a little bit about the managers weren't really happy with your early champions, taking on these responsibilities.
Yeah.
So a couple follow-ups. How did you address that with the managers? And then did your champions have that written into the kind of their job responsibilities, or are they still doing it, ad hoc? And then the last part is, are there any incentives for the champions that take on these extra responsibilities?
Yeah, great questions. So, we didn't have a conversation with their managers. That was we felt like that ship had sailed, which is partly why we're switching up this strategy to go, actually, we're going to end up talking to the managers first. And you've got an initiative to drive, you've got some business results you want to drive, who do you want to help you do that? And the assumption is then, or actually we'd try to make that explicit, that would actually get baked into that champion's commitments, their performance review, right? So we want to do that, and that really should be incentive enough, but I'm always looking for ways to give them those and give them some recognition. So we're going to work on better ways to do that too.
Okay.
Absolutely. Erica.
It sounds like you've learned a lot of great lessons about community management and building a champion program. And Yammer has recently stopped offering their certification programs.
Yes.
So I was wondering if you might consider sharing some of your internal materials with us, maybe through IT Showcase or another official channel.
Wow. Now you're putting me to the test here, because here I am talking about working openly and sharing, and do I want to share that? Is it good enough yet? Yeah, I'd be happy to share whatever we find is useful. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much.